Hello, welcome back, and in this unit I'm going to cover something that is really complex and deals with cosmology among Mesoamericans. I'm not going to talk about Aztec religion, I'm going to talk about in general about how Mesoamericans were so connected to the forces of nature that for them nothing was separated. Their life, society, politics, their economics, it was all intertwined with religion. But for you to understand this, it's really important that maybe we can try really hard to separate the idea of a God in terms of how Westerners have viewed gods. So we have been fed with this idea that Ares, let's say Thor, um, all these amazing Greek gods were the pattern of how most of the other gods in the world behave. But for Mesoamericans, gods were not like humans. They were more like forces. And this is really important that I want you to understand that. So when I mention some of these gods, for example, Tlaloc, that means rain, it's not really the rain god. This energy force is more associated with moist, with the forces of the water, how permeate the earth and give birth to plants, is related to fertility. So that's how they view these gods. Not as a person with powers, it was more as a force. So let me explain how they view the world as it was connected to the universe and everything became one. What we historians know about Mesoamerican religion relies heavily on the account left by the Spaniards. A lot of the friars, they wrote books called Codices, and in these books they have a lot of the history, perhaps ethnographic work, where in detail the survivals of the Aztecs, they were telling these friars how things were before the Spanish European arrivals. One of them was Sagún, and Sagún put together a book called El Códice de Florentino, or Codex or Florentine. It's probably one of the most important books out there because it really tells in detail about the Aztec gods, Aztec rituals, and we can sort of trace back a lot of the culture from the Mayans, from the Aztecs, and interpret the cosmology, which is really amazing, in a way that the Spanish were always looking at that from their Christian point of view. So let me start with the concept of Ometeoro. And this is a supreme power. Think about it, the generator of all the forces in the cosmos. It's embraced by a dual form of a female and a male, and there are the giver of life to everything. Now, we can relate to this to some extent as we move on to the earth, because Mesoamericans view earth very different than the way we see earth today. For them, the earth was divided in four corners, and the universe had four little corners. The earth was kind of like a round disc, and around that was water, but every corner had a color. And this is kind of neat because it really comes from the Indian corn. If you think about the colors of the corn, so one of the corners was yellow, the other corner was red, the other corner was black, and the other corner was white. And the center, which is the green leaf of the corn, that was the center of the earth. And from that center, you have world above, which you can call it heavens, and you also have the underworld. So that was how they were connected. That's how earth was connected in this plane where the heavens above, underworld, and everything around it was connected through a leading force. I'm talking about these 4 points, which is the cardinal points. You have the south, the north, the east, and the west. They were all guided by this force, which a lot of the historians call it gods. But once again, like I mentioned to you, do not think about them as a like Thor. No, think about them as a force that manifests, and it has an impact on how you do things, or how things grow, or how things unravel. So I'm going to cover the concept of the forces of nature because Tlaloc, who happens to be, quote, the rain god, which really represents that it manifests in moist water. As a matter of fact, if you go into the etymology of Tlaloc, really means the earth that is moist. And from that, you have corn that is growing out of it. For all Mesoamericans, like I mentioned before, corn became the main food staple, and it was also associated with how corn was sustaining the population, and once again the transfer of energy, because even in El Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, the Maya and so many other Mesoamericans, they thought that by putting corn inside of the deceased mouth, it was going to give him energy so he could travel to all these worlds. Remember, I mentioned there were heavens above and the underworld, and they needed energy so the spirit per se could travel through all these different dimensions. So it shouldn't be any surprise that one of the main gods was the sun god. So think about how we cannot live without the sun. And there was a relationship between the energy of the sun and how the sun provided life to everything. So there was a connection between the sun, water, the earth, and there's a beautiful tale that really can make this idea more clear. And think about how when it rains, then rain falls on earth, and according to the myth and mythology, earth goes by Coatlicue, and once again, it's not a goddess. She represents the soil. She represents the entire planet. And then Earth gets impregnated. She gets pregnant and she gives birth Sente Otto, who happens to be the corn god, one of the most important gods in Mesoamerican mythology. You can find it from the Teotihuacanos to the Mayas and then the Aztecs. But then Quetzalcoatl, which is really amazing. Once again, you have to think about this as a force. He's seen as the god of wisdom, the god of creation. And in the mythology of Mesoamericans, the world had been destroyed 4 times. And because Mesoamerican cosmology believe in rebirth, believe in reconstruction, destruction, construction, then Quetzalcoatl goes to the underworld and finds some bones, and he also steals some corn seeds and brings back life again. So corn becomes so intertwined with how the world was connected for them. You also have this duality, day and night. So, for example, when you read about the Olmecs, how they thought the jaguar was the force of the night. Yeah, the jaguar is a nocturnal animal. It hunts at night. And then most of these deities, they function in that way. So you have water, you have drought, you also have light, you have the night. And they were obsessed with a cosmic battle between the moon and the sun. And the sun, the powerhouse of energy, was always being challenged by the night. And they thought that the moon and the sun was in constant battle. And that's how they thought that they could give sun energy. And because we are also made out of everything, one of the most powerful sources was blood. And that's how human sacrifices took a huge role within the cosmology of Mesoamerican. By giving blood to the gods, not to the God, but to the powerhouse of the sun, then energy was going to flow. It was going to continue to bring balance to the universe. So for most Mesoamericans, human beings were reservoir of energy. There were two main centers of energy located in your body. One was the heart. They refer that to Tejolia, and Tejolia was connected to the sun, and that's how blood was so important, and that's how reaping the heart and offering to the sun was one of the main crucial sacrificials that it was offered to Tonatiuh, the sun god. The other aspect of human sacrifices deal with another part of the body that they thought that was also a center of energy, and that was your head. That is how archaeologists and anthropologists have found so many skeletons that have been beheaded. It's really well known among the Aztecs that they placed the skulls on racks. When the Spaniards they saw that, they were pretty much freaking out or in horror by having to see that. But now that I'm talking about the Spanish viewing human sacrifices as a horrific event, let's not forget that the Spanish Europeans also had sacrifices among them, and that was done through the Inquisition. For example, if you ever go to Mexico City, you still have the ruins of Templo Mayor, two twin pyramids dedicated to human sacrifices. One of the pyramids was dedicated to Tlaloc, and the other pyramid was dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, which is another important god that is the god of war, that plays a huge role on the Mexica myth of migration into the Valley of Mexico. So I wanted to circle back to the beginning when I was talking how the earth where we live is connected to the cosmos through 13 heavens above, 9 underworlds. They are all guided by an energy force, and how humans were power of energy. That if you die or if you were sacrificed, you sort of went into a recycle mode because they did not really believe in death. And this is how El Dia de los Muertos come into this picture. The idea that you really didn't die, that you transcended and move on to one of those worlds. Maybe heaven or maybe the underworld. The concept of hell was very different because they didn't really have that among Mesoamericans. You die and you went to one of heaven depending on how you die and not how you behave while you were in the world of the living. Even today, a lot of Guatemalans and even southern Mexico, people continue to harvest based on the moon patterns. So they have not really moved away from the old belief of how they were connected to the cosmos. It's something that it was so embedded within their psyche, and the idea of sacrificing, dying, it was not really dying, it was really transcending and moving on to a different plane. I'm going to live with that right now, and as we explore El Dia de los Muertos, this concept of being connected, it will make more sense. That's all for now. Take care.